As a performance dietitian, I spend my day helping athletes and high performers get every advantage possible, and hydration is one of the biggest difference makers. But what most people don't realize is hydration isn't just about how much water you drink, but how your body actually absorbs and utilizes it. And Protect Hydration is the only hydration supplement that I recommend. It's a liquid electrolyte supplement that absorbs more efficiently than any powder on the market. The precise formula of sodium, potassium, and magnesium matches exactly what you lose in sweat, with no sugar, no dyes, and no artificial ingredients. I've tested nearly every hydration product on the market, and nothing comes close to the performance and purity of Protect. It's veteran-owned, made in the USA, and it's the only product I trust for myself and my clients. If you take your performance seriously, go to protect.com/truth and experience the difference real hydration makes. Now, so I'm here with Coach Scott Benson. Scott, go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about what you do and what has brought you to this point.
Okay, Scott Benson. I own a company called Benson Sports Training. The company's been in existence for 16 years. Sports performance training for athletes from 8 years old to professional athletes to our 60 and 70-year-old athletes that are trying to maintain an edge on the golf course or the pickleball court. We don't discriminate. We just like to help athletes stay injury-free and performing at a high level. This is kind of a progression of my lifetime in sports. I was a high-level track and field athlete a long time ago. I was an Olympic hopeful, like so many things didn't work out, which I think really is what brought me back to coaching is just a lot of experiences I had along the way. And maybe a lot of that adversity that I faced, I feel like I can help athletes and maybe avoid some of those landmines. At the end of the day, my philosophy is much more about preparing young athletes for life than it is to prepare them for a professional sport. As we know, that's such a small percentage of that happening. It's awesome when I get to work with those type of athletes, but I really like the life lessons that sports, especially the sports performance side, where you're dealing with that discipline and that commitment and that consistency, how that plays out in these people's lives after their sports careers are long gone. And I maintain a lot of those relationships with those kids that are now 30, 35 years old and have families and jobs. And it's those relationships are definitely the biggest benefit of this career.
But if we back it up even before that, I know that you had a stable banking career before you decided to even get into coaching. So what was it that made you decide to make that shift?
First half of my professional career, I worked in predominantly finance. Coming out of college, that was my mindset. Is I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to make money, and so I always worked in kind of a sales-driven field. And it's the thing. When sports was gone, it was the thing that felt most like sports, that competitive fighting for deals. And so I had a very successful career. I owned my own financial company for about 8 years and luckily sold it in 2008, right before everything crashed.
Oh, yeah.
And then I went into a banking position and worked in a private banking position for about 3 or 4 years. And everything was going great, and it was, I don't have any regrets, but along that same time frame, I was inducted into a Hall of Fame, and it just going back, I kind of had left the sports world, and just that kind of brought me back into it. And at this banquet speaking, and there were so many young athletes there, and it really got me thinking that, I'd had a great professional career up to that time, but I wasn't passionate about it. I didn't feel like I was changing lives. I think a lot of it was very self-serving. So I had kind of been, as a side, I would call it a hobby because I wasn't getting paid. I would have athletes from time to time just ask, hey, can you help me out with this? And would agree to that. But I was just really drawn to the thought that I needed to get back into that world and really give back. I attribute all my success in the professional world to things that I learned in the sports world. And I just had an overwhelming feeling I needed to get back in that world. And so I had a scary conversation with my wife that I think I can do this. I think I can make a go of this as a business. And at the time I had about 5 kids I was working with in my basement, not getting paid. And rather than her telling me that I was crazy, she said, okay. She said, there's been times where you've had my back in our marriage and you've covered me financially. She said, I got you. If you really think you can do this, go for it. And so that was around 2009, and kind of started doing it a little bit more as a business. But this started out of the basement in my house, and as it grew, couple walls had to be knocked out, and some renovations, and then it got to the point where I had a lot of strangers coming into my house, and I decided, okay, it's time. And so rented space, and that was 15, 16 years ago, and gone from a few kids in my basement to we typically are training 500 to 600 athletes a month. And it's just been an awesome transition, and I get to wear sweatpants to work every day rather than a suit and tie. So pretty good trade.
Oh, that's great. And you mentioned how it started off before it was a profession, before it was a business. You were training some kids just for free out of your basement, and that's kind of my own story. I was working with fighters with their nutrition for free because I enjoyed it. It was something I liked, and I was good at it. And within 1 year of me doing it for free, all of a sudden I had 3 UFC champions paying me, and I never meant for it to be a business.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important because I find that with a lot of industry professionals, they start off doing something for free just as a passion project because they like it so much and they already have a full-time job elsewhere. And then they let that passion just steer the way until that becomes a business that overcomes the business that they were doing full time.
Yeah. And I was very, very fortunate to, if it would not have been for the success I had in the financial world, it would have been very hard to do this. Luckily I was in a very comfortable spot to where, I could get into this and I could truly care about the kids and the athletes. And it didn't need to be financial driven right off the bat. And I think that allowed me to take my time and make it extremely affordable for people. So I was truly a resource rather than me chasing a dollar.
And I know you mentioned being I think you called it a successful athlete, but that's being a little bit modest because I do know your record. So talk about the record, what that was, and how long that's been the record.
So I was, my story is a little bit different. I was not a really athletic kid growing up. I was always a really good baseball player. For some reason, the hand-eye thing was there, and I had some success at that. But I was a late bloomer. Struggled in football, struggled in basketball. They just were not my things. And so honestly, by the time I was in 8th grade, I had kind of given up on sports. It just wasn't going to be my thing. And I was walking out of school one day in 9th grade, and a coach had some kids and they were high jumping. And he said, "Benson, get over here." And, I've got jeans on and, I don't really want to do that, coach. He's like, "Come on, just try it." And So I come over and kind of fly over the height that they were working at. And he's like, you got to come out for track. And, that's incredible. We got to get you in here. And so I reluctantly agree. I really wasn't into it, but I was like, okay, I'll give this a try. And so I go to the first track meet, and they've got me signed up for the 400, not the high jump. And if you know jumpers in track and field, they kind of gravitate to that because they really don't like to run. And so here I am. I'm stuck in a 400. I have no idea what I'm doing. Basically experienced the feeling of near death, and that was it. I walked away. I was not going to do that. Quit track, and that could have been the end of it there. So then my sophomore year, some of my buddies were going to go out for track. We're all baseball players. And so I kind of just followed the crowd and decided to give it another shot, and started to have a little bit of success. I think I got third place at the state track meet, and kind of created my own identity a little bit. That's the first time I'd really had any success in sports. And so then still don't, track's not going to be my thing. I like baseball. I like basketball. And coming into our junior year, I spent all summer getting ready to play basketball. And, I'm kind of that awkward teenager, that 15, 16-year-old, not real coordinated. And basketball tryouts get there. I'm 6'3", one of the only kids that can dunk a basketball, and go through tryouts, and I get cut. And I was devastated. Like I just didn't know what to do. And so I kind of went all in on training and started to really, focus. I was very fortunate that I had a very good coach that kind of prescribed some off-season work. And going into my junior year, things changed drastically, and I ended up breaking the state record for the first time. And that was at the state meet that year. And still really, I don't think of myself as a college prospect. I mean, you got to understand, this is a long, long time ago, 30 some years ago. So it was a little different this year, where sports weren't, the only focus wasn't trying to get to college. You did sports because it was fun and your buddies did it. But anyways, I go on my senior year and end up jumping. I broke the state record 7 times that year, end up jumping 7'2", which for the majority of that season was number 1 in the United States. And right at the very end of the year, a kid jumped 7'2¼ So I end up second in the country. So go from a sophomore season, first season of 6'2", to jumping 7'2" my senior year. And now all of a sudden I've got every college in the United States talking to me. And so that was back in 1988, just to put a time frame on that. And that was the state record, and that still stands as the state record, 38 years, 36 years. And it's, at this point, that kind of dates me more than anything else. When people, they start computing the date, and, oh, you're that old. And, but yeah, it's one of the oldest state records still remaining. It's one of those things that was a big part of my identity for a lot of years, but now I'm kind of just wishing somebody would break it. It's time.
Well, you said something about the fact that you started off with it and immediately had some success, and it seemed like that kind of kept you going. And I do find that that's one thing with kids that parents often miss, is they push kids into the sports that they want them to play, not necessarily the sport that the kid enjoys and finds confidence in. Because I've had this discussion with parents. Confidence, especially for a man, starts at a young age. It starts when you start racking up those wins. And the kids that have those touchdowns at a young age, or those score the buckets at a young age, the game-winning shot, it's like every time they have a successful metric, it gives them historical proof that they're good, and they just build on that. And I remember that the kids that were good in elementary school had the confidence in middle school because they already I'm good. It's the kids who already start off kind of not being good at something, and maybe their parents are just forcing them to play it. They just never really get that confidence because they don't have historical proof of being good at it. And I think it's so important for parents to, I do think it's good to push your kid to try different sports. But if your kid finds success in one, even if it's a sport you have nothing to do with, no knowledge about whatsoever, let your kid do it, because that confidence is going to carry them for the rest of their life.
Right. And like you said, don't put them into a sport because you want them to be good at it. It has to be intrinsic to them. And I see this all the time. I have this group of youth baseball players, and they all train together as a group. Awesome kids. They work hard. But during the summer, I'll ask them, hey, when's your next game? I got to go ask my mom. Well, when I was in Little League Baseball, I had the entire schedule mapped out. I knew who we were playing, who was probably pitching, because that was everything to me at that point. And the fact that these kids, they don't even know when their next game is, tells me it's very much parent driven. And I deal with this every day. I see, mom and dad want it way more than the kids do. And it's forced me to take a look at how I deal with my own kids. And I have a way, way different philosophy with my own kids, as I let my kids kind of flounder a little bit, and I'll put them in sports because I want them involved in things, but I stand back. And if they struggle, and I'm going to stand back and I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Now, when they get to a certain age, when either they're sick of struggling or they find a love for one of their activities and they come to me and I can see the light bulb go on, then I'm all in. I'm going to do everything I can to help them out. But my oldest daughter, she, at a young age, she was okay at stuff. As she got older, started to take things more serious, and then we started, to kind of push with the training, and she ended up being a Division I track and field athlete. Now, my next daughter that's coming through, she's a junior in high school. She was not an athlete at a young age. She was tall and skinny and uncoordinated, no work ethic, didn't care. And so I let her, really through probably her freshman year, she wasn't even on the radar. Sophomore year, she makes the varsity volleyball team. She got pulled up. She was a good high jumper, or is a good high jumper. Got pulled up to varsity in 8th grade. So that what you're talking about, that them feeling some success, yeah, and then fueling from there. And now she's being recruited to be a multi-sport college athlete. And then I've got another one. My youngest son is 11, about to turn 12, and not really interested. We've done some sports, but this last year he really got fired up about basketball, had a great baseball season, and at 11 this summer was the first time he came into the gym. And there was tears. He did not want to do this, but I was like, come on, bud, you're 11. We got to get started. I'm going to put you in a group. Do what you can. And now he's 3 days a week. He's gotten stronger, faster, loves it. And, but it's been at kind of their tempo, not mine. And, I think more kids need to be given that grace to let them figure out what they truly want to be good at and make it their decision to go all in on it.
Yeah, and sports are starting younger now than ever. Like I'm here, like we have programs locally where kids are starting at age 3 already doing the sport. And I'm thinking, my gosh, like all that we had was T-ball when you were 5. Like you could play flag football, I think, when you were 7. And my son plays football, and they've had tackle football since he was 6.
Right.
And it's like, I think it's a little too early. And I think we're just pushing that more and more. And it's because we're so, we're competitive in nature. Like that's a normal primal instinct. But I think we're getting it wrong in terms of developing athletes, because the greatest athletes weren't doing this. When we look, and we could argue who the best is at any given sport, except for basketball, it's Michael Jordan. No,
Agreed.
but dating myself and you. But when we look at that, it's like these people weren't obsessed with the sport from a very young age and playing this year round as well. And it's like now we're forcing kids into year round sports, which it's not even my opinion. There's literal scientific data showing that it is contrary to athletic development to put kids into these sports that are year round. I mean, we're starting to see kids have what's been for a couple decades now, kids starting to have Tommy John surgery at the high school level, when this was originally a surgery designed to help an old pitcher last a little bit longer. And now we're seeing kids have to have it, like youth have to have it, because they're playing so much of the same sport that's focused on the same parts of the body year round. And I think we're damaging kids who could otherwise be great athletes, and they never get to tap into that because we're specializing them. We're forcing them to be specialists rather than athletes, which is inherently the ability to do multiple facet things in sports. So what do you think about the year-round sports? Like, is that an issue that you deal with parents, and how do you talk to the parents about that?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say on that topic. You used the word development, and we're not developing athletes. We're one of the only countries in the world that does not have a long-term athletic development program. So everywhere else, they recognize this. They start them at a young age, and there's a reason. There's a course of action depending on an 8-year-old. This is what they should be working on. A 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, all the way up till the college level, to when we want our athletes to be the best at 17 and 18 years old, and then beyond that, where in the United States, it's, I want it right now. My 10-year-old needs to be the best kid out there. And to prove that, we're going to go play in every tournament that's possible to be played in. I'm going to drop 30 grand because this is what's going to get my kid to the next level. And you're so right. There is no development. And I deal with this every day, where I see, and it goes back to the last 10 years, there's been this huge push that you have to be a multi-sport athlete. And you've got guys like Nick Saban and Urban Meyer coming out saying this. Well, everybody's going to listen to them because they're the best of the best at the NCAA level in coaching. But there's kind of levels to that, because people took that to heart. And now what I see is athletes that are specializing in 3 different sports year round, because the demands from the sport coaches they're not going to lessen. And so now I've got kids in the summertime, they're going to basketball open gym in the morning. They've got football 7-on-7 league in the evening. They've got a baseball game that day, and now they're coming into the gym on top of that. And so overuse injuries are going through the roof right now, because these young bodies, the thing that could protect them is being in a good sports performance program, but that they don't have time for that because they're playing games all the time. We have, basketball players that are playing 50 to 70 games in the off season. NBA players don't play that much. And we're expecting 16-year-old bodies to be able to hold up to that. It's so broken, the way that we do things. And it's amazing that other countries have it right. We just happen to have more crazy genetic athletes in the United States. And what we do, and this was explained to me by one of my mentors, is it's kind of like we have a hopper, and it funnels down, and we're throwing everybody into that. And at the bottom, we just happen to have some guys that come out that are pretty good. But if you watch the Olympics, the other countries are closing the gap, because they're developing athletes from a young age and doing everything correctly, rather than it just kind of being by chance that you end up at that level. You talk about at the young age, one of the quotes I love is a guy named Tom House, who's very prevalent in the baseball world. I believe he coached at USC, but he said, I cannot emphasize enough how unimportant sports before puberty are. And, what he means by that is that emphasis on having to be the best at that age. It does not matter. Those kids should be, number one, having fun because they want to be having fun. They should be learning skill, and they should be developing their bodies. And we've just got to get away from this mindset that we got to play every weekend. It's destroying athletes, because as we continue to do this, they're going to be more and more injuries. And obviously I'm biased that the sports performance world should be a bigger part of youth athletics.
Yeah, you might be biased, but it's a shared opinion across the board by every expert. So it's one of those things. It's when all of the industry experts are saying the same things, it's like maybe parents should start to listen a little bit,
Yeah.
And it's I like what you said about, he had said pushing sports before puberty, and especially with guys, because as we know, we've been through it and we deal with kids. I coach some kids too. We see this. You have no idea what's going to happen once puberty starts. So like the kid who's not aggressive and passive, he might be an absolute monster when he starts getting some testosterone. And the kid who's naturally athletic and aggressive and all that, now, once puberty hits, he might only care about girls and not care about sports whatsoever. So like you really can't put too much stock into what that's going to be like until the hormones start doing what hormones are going to do. And I see that so much. And I have my opinion on this, and I'm curious of yours. I question, how much is it? Two things. So we had Coach Luke Day from the University of South Carolina on, and he said something that I thought was so powerful. It's one of my favorite things I've ever heard Coach say. And he said, I don't know how much kids love football. I think kids love the thing that loves them back. He was talking about how I don't necessarily know that how many of them love the actual sport. They just love what it's giving them. They love the notoriety, the excitement. And I think there's so many kids that are out there that's truly what they're after. Like they're playing these sports, and I've dealt with parents who they're year-round athletes, and they'll come to someone like me and they want me to help their kid get bigger or stronger. And I'm like, well, maybe we should take some time off and just focus on getting stronger and not focus on playing the game. Like, oh, but he loves year-round baseball. And I always question, but does he, or does he love the love that you give him because he's playing year-round baseball? Or is he addicted to the success that it feels like? Because those aren't really the things you should be addicted to in sport. It should be development. It should be playing the game itself. Like if you get addicted to just being good and winning, you play the game long enough, you're going to be really disappointed, because it's not going to happen all the time. And I think sometimes it's just a self-serving thing, that parents are doing it to live vicariously through their kids. And I think oftentimes it's also they're mistaking their kids' love for the sport as their kids' desire for something else that the sport is giving them that maybe the parents aren't giving them.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And let's be really honest, it is not easy to be a kid right now.
Sure.
The world has obviously changed, the cell phones and just the mentality of these kids right now. It is hard. And, I have a men's group that I belong to, and a pediatrician made this comment, and it kind of floored me because I have two daughters, but he said a cell phone in a teenage girl's hand is about the same as holding a pistol to her head. I mean, it's that dangerous. And that's getting a little off topic, but my point is, it is so hard for these kids right now. So any love they get from these sports, obviously they're going to be attracted to it. And I think you're exactly right that, it may be more for, these kids that have some success and they get some publicity, kids just want to be seen. Yeah. And I think, the fact that they may get that from sports may pull them closer to that sport, not necessarily because they have a passion for that sport, but it feels good.
Yeah. I do think there's something to be said about introducing kids, and sometimes even, I was going to say, I hate to say this, but I don't hate to say this. People will hate to hear this, but making your kid play a sport at a young, at a young age, but not too young, just to experience it and try it out. I coach 6, 7, 8-year-old football, and we'll get that a lot with kids. Like, well, I don't even want to be here. I'm like, well, why are you here? Like, my mom wants me to play. I'm like, okay, well, that's not my fault. So I just need you to do your best while you're here. There's a lot of kids who would love to play and their moms won't let them. So just maybe appreciate the fact that your mom's bringing you. And then you start talking to the mom. Anytime I hear that, I'll actually talk to the mom about it, because I want to know. It's like, hey, like, they didn't want to play. I'm just curious. What is it that you're hoping football gives them? And it's always like, I think they need confidence, or I think that they need to be toughened up a bit, or I think they need to be exposed to hard things. I'm like, no, that I like, because that is some things that sports will do.
Sure.
And especially, in the modern era, kids have every possible chance not to be active. They have like endless amounts of things. When I was a kid, especially as like, we weren't wealthy by any means growing up. It's like, if I wanted to play, I had very limited options, and most of them were outside. So kids don't have that anymore. There's right. endless options of entertainment. So I do think it's cool when parents kind of get a kid to try, but then step back, see what they thought about it, see if they liked it or not, and then reintroduce to something else, and keep trying, because you may be surprised what it is that they actually enjoy.
Yeah, but we also have to remember that even if a child is in a sport, maybe it's not because they want to be, maybe it's mom and dad put them in that sport. Even if they're, faced with adversity and not having any luck, maybe they're failing, they're still learning. Yeah. And that's the beauty of sports, is we learn way, way more through our failures than we do through our successes. Success is easy. Failures, they require us to take a look and either make a change or, kind of stay the same until we're uncomfortable enough to make that change. Yeah. So I'm all on board with kids being in activities at a young age. I just think there's way more learning potential than just, do I score a touchdown or make a basket?
Sometimes failing is the learning that they needed. Is something I'm seeing a lot. I see it even with my oldest son. I hear other parents seeing it as well, and I'm just curious if you're seeing it with the younger athletes. I feel like kids now are afraid they're terrified of not being good at something, to the point that they'll have paralysis. Like, they won't even try it because they're afraid they won't be good at it. Whereas when we were kids, it was, I'm just going to try it. And honestly, if I suck at it, I'm just going to keep doing it because my friends are doing it. But now kids won't try something if they don't think they're going to be good at it. And that's insane to me. I don't know if that's something we've done as a society. Like, we've put so much importance on winning instead of learning, that now kids don't want to do something if they don't have a guaranteed chance of winning. I don't know if it's like that whole, like, you let a kid beat you at a game so much that eventually they just expect it. What do you think's going on there? Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I think it's an epidemic. I think, if I look back 20, 30 years ago, if let's just say you were on a varsity baseball team and you were a sophomore, and the person that plays your position is a senior and they're better than you, or let's just say they're a junior, so they have 2 years left and they're clearly better than you. Back in the day, you would go to work and you would figure out a way to give yourself the best chance to take that position, or you would try to play a different position, or you do whatever you could to get on the floor And you're exactly right. I see it all the time. They will just quit the sport. They'll just walk away from it. And I blame pretty much all of the world's problems on when we started giving trophies away. And I joke about that. But I kind of, the mentality shifted to where, it used to be you were going to have to work for it. And then all of a sudden we started recognizing kids for just participating. And that's the wrong message in sports, because that's not going to get you very far. It's not going to get you very far in the real world. One of the proudest I've ever been of my oldest daughter, we were playing basketball. I think it was a YMCA league. And we come down after the last game and they got tables set out and there's trophies. Okay, come get your trophy. And my daughter looked at me and she said, "Dad, did we win?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, why are we getting a trophy?" I said, "Everybody gets one." She's like, "We're good. Let's go." She didn't take the trophy. And I thought that was awesome. So yeah, I'm blaming all of it on participation trophies.
I do think it's the participation trophy mindset. I really do, because when you're celebrating success, when you're celebrating completion as success, like success doesn't really matter as much, And there's something to that. I've said before, I'm not poking fun at people who do this, but they do need to look at a greater thing. Like as humans, we were not made to see success as completing a 5K. Like you should inherently, outside of, like a physical issue with your body, you should be able to complete a 5K. That's not like, that should just be basic survival abilities. Let's celebrate doing really, really good. And I just don't think that we see that as much anymore. And that's even branching out into the older kids. That's NIL essentially. You're taking away the hunger that college kids used to have that made everybody prefer NCAA over the NFL at times. Was just that hunger because they haven't made it yet. And now you got kids that have already kind of made it. So I do think eventually you're going to see that. And I've talked about it on several episodes just because it ties in a lot to that as well. I just think you're taking away the hunger for success by rewarding completion and just performing the activity.
Yeah. It is certainly a different world. And I mean, we could also be getting labeled as just, the old timers that don't like the way it is now. But I had a good conversation, still am very close to a lot of my college teammates. And, we were talking about, what if we would have been getting NIL money back in the day? And we had, we were top 5 in the NCAA, competing for national championships. So we would have been getting paid. And we all agreed it would have been bad. We were out there grinding for each other. We just had this close-knit team that we would do anything for each other. And these kids, now they're getting paid, it's going to breed selfishness. So yeah, I just think, societal impact of things that are happening are just trickling down now to these kids. And like I said earlier, at the end of the day, we're doing this to create successful human beings. And if you're quitting now, you're going to quit in 10 years, you're going to quit in 20 years. And it's just, I put that back on parents a lot, that, they need to be teaching those lessons of dealing with adversity. And if you make a commitment to something, you stay disciplined to it. And it seems to me that it's a lost art now.
Yeah. Can you imagine giving a madman like Ray Lewis millions of dollars when he was in college? We would have never had NFL Ray Lewis because he would have been dead in Vegas somewhere. I think you're ruining a lot of our future greatest athletes by giving them too much now, so they don't have that hunger later.
Right.
But I know you've worked with kids. What's the youngest you work with on general?
I think in the gym right now, probably 7 or 8.
Okay. So you've worked with anywhere from 7-year-olds to adults
70.
at a national stage. What are the consistent lessons and the consistent needs that you see across all ages, the things that everyone needs to know and apply?
I think, every high level athlete I've ever worked with, it's mindset. Um, you just, there's so many different components that need to come together to create a college level athlete or a professional level athlete. But that mindset is probably the most consistent thing that I see. I've had freak athletes that, they went on to be Division I athletes, but they had the athletic talent to be professional athletes. They did not have the mindset for it. And that's a tough one. As a coach, you'd love to be able to be involved in that, but that seems to be, you're either wired that way or not. So, and I tell my own kids, it doesn't matter what it is, you better be competing. If we're playing ping pong, I'm going to try to whoop you. And, from what I've seen, you either have that or you don't. And that mindset is what manifests discipline. And discipline is going to be what creates that success, because, professional athletes, it doesn't matter who it is. There's days where you don't want to do it. You don't want to get in the weight room, and the discipline is what keeps you in there. It's not motivation. Motivation is awesome, but that fades. I can watch a Rocky movie and want to go out and be the heavyweight champion of the world, but an hour later that's gone. If you don't have the discipline as the underlying, motivating factor, it's just not going to happen. And so that's kind of the biggest things I've seen with athletes. I've got some athletes that, they started in my gym at 12 or 13 years old, and they were nothing, they didn't jump out at me like, wow, this guy's going to the NFL or this guy's going to Major League Baseball. But they did have that unrelenting discipline that they were never, ever going to give up. And to see a kid like that, go through and be a high round draft pick, that's really, really cool.
So the thing that ties it all together that you've seen is the discipline. Is that something that you think can be changed? Like, can you have a kid who's super undisciplined and all of a sudden there's something that you can apply as a coach or a parent can apply to improve the discipline and make them a more disciplined athlete?
I don't know that a coach or a parent can apply that. I think it goes back to what you were talking about, where they start to get a little bit of love from the sport and it makes them feel good. And it's okay, I did a little bit of this to get here. Now, if I start committing a little bit more, and yes, I absolutely think, discipline is habitual. It's something that can be created. And so, yes, I've seen that. I've seen kids we've had kids where I thought, no way. They're lazy, and all of a sudden, that light bulb goes on at some point. And I love making that call to parents. Like, hey, I don't know what your daughter, I don't know what happened, but it's clicking now. And unfortunately, I have more conversations with parents, and this is a horrible business model on my part, but if you're in my gym and you're lazy and you're fighting me to do the work, I'll call the parent or I'll have a discussion with the athlete. Like, look, this is not the place for you. And not that I ever want to turn business away, but I have to keep a culture and an environment that's conducive to winning and turning out top level athletes. And when you bring in somebody that shouldn't be there, it's a cancer to everybody else. So, but yes, to answer your question, yes, I do believe discipline that can change.
I think it starts with intention, because you have to have the intention to create actions, and then you have to have the action to create habits. Then the habits create outcomes. And if the intention's not there to begin with, it's just not going to happen. And I deal with that with clients of all levels, from general population to special operators to NFL, Super Bowl champions. It's like the difference in the ones that I've seen that succeed is they want it so bad, and that you will find a way. There's no like that would be nice. Like they want it. Even at a young age, I saw it with my own son. Like last year in football, kid was afraid of everything. Like he, as a typical 7-year-old would be, someone would run at him and he would kind of get scared and move. And he wasn't very good at football. Because again, he's 7 years old and not many kids are, but
Right.
he wanted to be good at football. And his mom, my wife, didn't really want him to play this year, but he wanted to play. And I am a coach of the team. And I was telling him, like, well, if he wants to play, we need to let him play. Like if he wants to. And I would ask him, like, do you want to play football? I was like, yeah, I want to play football. Do you want to be good at football? And if he just said, like, I don't really care, that would signal something to me that honestly you probably never will be. But he wanted to. He's like, I want to be good at football. I'm like, okay, well, these are the things you have to do to be good at football. And we would work through that in practice. Like, you have to do this in practice if you want to get good at that, because no one's good at that to begin with, because they don't learn that. And it was like at the beginning of this season, he started doing the things that could make you good at football. And this year he's, one of our top tacklers, and he's very good at football. But it's because even when he wasn't good, he wanted it. Like, he wanted to be there. The intention was there. And I think that's the thing a lot of people are missing. Like, it never starts with an intention to be good at something.
Right.
It's an expectation. They just want the outcome, but they don't intend to do what it takes to get to that position.
Perfect. You just summed up everything that we've been talking about. And it's been a recurring comment, but it has to be an intrinsic value to them. And what you said just a second ago about outcome. So my whole philosophy is not focusing on outcome. It's focusing on process. And this is where a lot of coaches make mistakes. And I can give an example personally. If you look at the first practice of every sport everywhere, and the coach is talking to the team, we're going to have a great season. I'm excited. We're going to win a state championship. We're going to win a conference championship. It's focused right away on the outcome. So I had a very short career as a head track coach. It's not something that was ever on my radar. Didn't really want to do it. My motivation was, as I was going through a divorce, and it was at my kids' school. So it was going to give me an opportunity to spend more time with my kids. That's the only reason I took the job. I get into it. Coach, what's the plan? Are we going to win state this year? No, we're not focusing on any of that. So I coached for 8 years. Not one time did I ever set a goal of winning anything. What I asked of the kids was, you give me 50 minutes every day. That's our goal. I want 50 minutes of business-like attitude. And I'll get you out of here. I know your basketball coach keeps you for 2 hours. Your football coach keeps you for 2.5 hours. I'm going to get you out of here in 50 minutes. And you can go do whatever you want, as long as you give me everything you have for that 50 minutes. No messing around. And we did this. I did it for 8 years. We won 6 girls state championships, 4 boys state championships, and we won 7 combined championships in a row. Yes. And it was just a different mindset for these kids. And the other thing I did is I spent a lot of time talking to each one of them about those intrinsic goals. Why are you out here? What do you want to get out of this? How can I help you be a better person, better athlete? And a lot of them were out there because they wanted to be better at basketball or football. And so I catered to that, kept the focus on the process, not the outcome. And we built a program that was really, nobody's ever going to replicate what we did. And just a little caveat on that, we didn't have a track. We didn't have a track. We didn't have any equipment. We didn't have high jump equipment. We didn't have anything. And we won the state track meet every year. And if we didn't win, we were runner up, all because I got the kids on the same page. I got the parents on the same page. We focused on the process, not the outcome.
I like that. For me, no sport clicked until wrestling. And I wasn't even really a really good wrestler, but I loved it. It was just fun to me. And I always go back to the fact that I think what made it great was I had a coach who made me feel great when I was doing it. And he did not care about winning whatsoever. In fact, it was Coach Grunder. In fact, he never wrestled. He just got put in this position and never wrestled in his life. So he's like, I don't know, how to help you all become better wrestlers. But he was a teacher and he was a mentor. He's like, I can help you, believe in yourself. And that's what he did. And we ended up being pretty darn good. And it changed me forever. Just because, again, he wasn't focused on outcomes. He was literally just focused on helping develop us as people and, finding the things that made us feel good and making us do well with it. And I still say to this day, that is what helped me then become a professional fighter, was someone that helped me just believe in my abilities and believe in myself and wasn't so focused on the outcome of whether or not I was good. I just became good as a side effect of the beliefs I had in myself. And I think that's important as well, to go back to not being so outcome focused and being more focused on the intention and the processes and the kids themselves.
Yeah, the relationship building is such an important part of coaching. And when I bring in a new coach, they're expecting to come in and, let's talk about cleans, let's talk about squats, let's talk about deadlifts, whatever it may be. And I'll sit down with them for an hour and, okay, so number one goal, you better know every kid's name in the gym. You better call them by their first name. You better ask them questions that have nothing to do with their sports. You want to know how they're doing in school. You want to know how their girlfriend's doing. You want to know about what's going on with their family, because by doing that, you're creating trust with that athlete. And there's too many coaches that it's just X's and O's. And I'm sorry, that's not what wins anymore. It is building relationships with athletes. And when you do that, number one, they're not going to leave you. But number two, they're going to run through a brick wall for you because they know that you care about them as something other than a point guard or a receiver. You actually care about them as a human being. And again, I said that earlier, I still have relationships with so many of my athletes, and, now they're calling me for marital advice and when should I have kids? And hey, can I run through this mock job interview with you? So I'm still their coach. It's just, it's a different process now, but that's happening because I spent the time building those relationships with them.
Yeah, I see that too, because I can't tell you how many times a kid has turned around to me and was like, hey, coach, did you? Because at this age, the coaches can be on the field on both sides. We just got to be 10 yards behind. Like, coach, did you see that block? I'm thinking, like, our quarterback got sacked, but they just want to know that you saw that they did well. Right. Or it's, like they're so focused on, they just want to hear that they did a good job. So we really try to do that because, again, that does matter to that kid.
Absolutely.
Just making them feel so special about it. Even doing it into adults. I've heard the NCAA college football coaches that we've had on say the same thing. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is just talk to them about something that has nothing to do with the sport itself. Just ask them about how their weekend was. Ask them, hey, did you go watch that new movie? Just connect with them on a personal level. So then they don't think that you just see them as a stat or someone that's giving them something. You see them as someone that cares about them.
Yeah, I have one of my athletes. He's a very, very high level distance runner with the University of Oregon. Nice. And when I started working with him in high school, he's kind of a quiet kid, and he was killing it. He was number one in the United States in 3 different events. He ran, I think, the 6th or 7th fastest mile ever as a high schooler, sub 4-minute mile. Coming into the gym, this kid's hard to talk to, to almost, an awkward kind of level. It's just very hard to communicate with. And, training's going great. He's doing a good job. He's doing everything I'm asking him. He works hard. But I like to connect with my athletes, and I'm not getting there with him. And so one day, and I try to do this with a lot of my athletes, we finished up the workout and I just hopped in with him. I said, all right, hey, let's finish up with some core. I didn't want to do core, but I wanted to get on his level to connect with him. And so we're finishing up the workout, and I said, Simeon, outside of running, what do you like to do, man? What are you passionate about? And I could tell immediately nobody had ever asked this kid that question. All it had ever been is, why are you so fast? Or how do you train? And he lit up. It was awesome. He's like, well, I'm second chair saxophone in the school band. Oh. And he just starts, talking to me about this. And I was like, well, what else? He's like, oh, Frisbee golf. That's my thing. He said, I'd love to be a professional Frisbee golf player. And I'm like, okay, that exists. And
yeah, I would have never thought.
Yeah. He's telling me about some guy that just got $1 million contract for playing Frisbee golf. And he loves to play chess. And that changed the relationship at that point, because I got down on the ground with him, did a little core, and asked him a few questions. And if coaches would take the time to find out who these kids are, man, that's enough. These kids, they just want to be somebody to listen to them. And then you become not only a coach, but you become part of their support system. And all kids need that, whether they're a champion athlete or they're struggling to make the freshman team.
Well, we've talked a lot about developing the kids, but where do you start? So you get a new kid, a 7-year-old, 8-year-old in there. Where does development start in your system?
Development starts with movement. So I'll, if I bring in, sometimes I'll speak to a group of young kids, and that young age, and I'll go around the room and I'll say, hey guys, what sports do we play? And they'll throw out all the sports, and I'll say, okay, well, who taught you how to swing a bat? Well, my dad did. Okay, well, who taught you to throw a football? Oh, well, my coach did. And I'll kind of go through this questioning, and then I'll say, hey, who taught you how to run? And I'll just get absolute blank stares. And finally, one of them will say, I taught myself how to do it. And I said, okay, well, who taught you how to jump? Same, and so we go through and the most fundamental, important movements we do in sports are all self-taught. So kids will go spend endless amounts of money on getting the right swing coach or quarterback coach, but we don't address the things that separate us on the field. And so when I bring in a new athlete, and it doesn't matter, I don't care if they're 7 or 17, they're going through a full movement assessment, and I'm going to, from the ground up, going to look at every joint, every movement, and we're going to fix deficiencies before we even get into the training program. So I always use the analogy of building a house, and we've got that foundation, but if there's cracks in that foundation and we start building on top of that, it's not going to work out too well. So we're going to have injury at some point, or we're going to have a lack of performance. So I start from the ground level of movement, and once we create proper movement patterns with everything, then we can start to build on top of that. And so depending on age, experience, in season, off season, what sport they're playing, I'll start young kids, 7, 8 years old. I'll start them on a strength training program. Does that look the same as a 17 or 18-year-old? Absolutely not. I'm not throwing a bar on somebody's back, but I can teach them how to squat the right way, and then I can have them pick up a light dumbbell, and then we can progress through that. And when they're ready, then we'll go to a front squat or a back squat. We do the same thing with our jump training, with our speed training. It's all progression, but that foundation has to be solid first.
I like that you start with movement, because movement's universal and it carries over into every sport, the same movements. when someone's trying to teach me, because I'm trying to learn how to play golf. So there's a really good golfer, a retired Navy SEAL in Virginia Beach that's trying to teach me swings. And he started trying to relate the swing to baseball. And then he goes, well, wait a second. You don't really like baseball. Like, let's talk about, like, I just wasn't, into it as much as a kid, but it's like, let's talk about punching. He goes, it's the exact same. Mm-hmm. And he starts going about how like that switch of the hips is the same thing that he would teach of a baseball player. He would teach it the same way. A puncher, he would teach the same way. Throwing a football, same way. And it is a lot of the movement patterns are the movement patterns, and they're primal movement patterns. They're the things that allowed us to, span across the globe, pick things up, carry them. No one had to teach us that. Move, like be bipedal, move fast, squat down, bend over. Like, all these movement patterns are the same ones that we just fine tune and then add a load to, or add an object to, that we have to become an unchained movement to. So again, it all does, when you think about it, come back to movement, and a lot of those movements are shared across every sport.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah. And you talked about you will start. So I'm just curious, what would a strength program look like for a kid as young as 7 or 8?
Again, it's going to be mostly body weight. I love getting them good at, what I'll do with a young athlete is, when we squat, I'll put them face up against a wall. So 4 inches from a wall where their nose is that close. And we'll start with body weight, and having that wall there forces them to sit back into a squat position instead of, rolling to the forefoot and becoming quad dominant, which so many young athletes are. We teach them right away how to sit back into a good squat position. And then again, it's that progression. Okay, go grab a 15-pound dumbbell. Then we go, we just continue to move up. Consistency is important. And just having those contacts with them multiple times per week. It's amazing. The human body is made to be resilient and to be stressed and then to rebound from that, whether you're 7 years old, 17, or 70.
What would you say to a parent that's asking the question, when should kids start working out? What age?
As soon as possible. I have that discussion a lot with parents. They, well, I'm going to wait, till they go through puberty before I want them lifting weights. Why? Why do you want to wait? Well, because I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them to, you always hear, well, you'll destroy your growth plates if you lift too early. That's absolute. There is no occurrences of that ever happening. And as a matter of fact, strength training at a young age, the science behind it strengthens bones, puts testosterone into the blood system. It's only good things as long as it's being coached the right way. Bringing in a kid and trying to get him to lift too much weight, that's bad at any age. That can happen at 17. It can happen as a beginner. That's just, going back to making sure you're working with a professional.
I was going to say that's happening in CrossFit gyms all across the country with 37-year-olds.
Right.
What about, so if we have an athlete, we've talked a lot about development of an athlete with a sport. You said you don't necessarily think athletes need to be multi-sport athletes, but let's say you're a single sport athlete. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say here. So how do we make the best out of a single sport athlete? Is that periodizing this sport to where we have an off season, even at a young age, and in that off season, we're working on the movement patterns and we're working on the strength and conditioning, and then only focusing on the sport when it gets to season?
Yeah. So my opinion on this is I don't have okay. So let me back up. When we're talking middle school athletes, play every sport. Try everything. Find that thing that you love or that loves you, like we talked about. But as you do move on, and the other thing is to, you have to kind of qualify these athletes, because there's a lot of athletes that they just want to play sports and they want to be a good high school athlete. They don't have ambitions beyond that. And then we're talking a different path for them. But when I have somebody that comes in and says, I NCAA or bust, that's, I want to be a college athlete. So we're going to try to put them on the right path. And, if you get to be a sophomore in high school and it's starting to look like, okay, baseball is going to be my best opportunity to move on. I don't have a problem with an athlete focusing on that sport. But what I will say is they have to be involved in a high level quality sports performance program. And that has to be considered another sport. The mentality of that, you have to look at it like it's another sport and it's year round and you're committed to it, because that's what's going to keep you healthy. The kids that are getting hurt because they're specializing too early, it's because all they do is the sport. The sports performance side and the athletic development can help balance out those issues. So we work with a baseball organization. There's about 5 different teams. So we're usually managing about 80 to 90 athletes through there. We do movement assessment on 13-year-olds that are coming into the program, and they're already showing, imbalance and deficiencies because of, just throwing or just swinging. They're very, they're movements that you do over and over and over again. And if you're not balancing the body out, yes, there's going to be an injury in your future. So, to quantify that statement, if you are going to be a single sport athlete, you have to be involved in a sports performance program and an athletic development program, because the other side of that, you can practice your sport every day, all day long. And I'm just going to stick with baseball. I had a meeting right before this with the baseball coach, and we had the same conversation. You can be in the cage all day long. That's not going to improve your exit velocity. It's not going to improve your foot speed. And those are the metrics that college coaches are looking at. So if you're not developing as an athlete, you're not going to have that opportunity to play beyond that level anyways. So the athletic development piece is just so important, whether you're a multi-sport athlete or a single sport athlete.
I mean, if coaches are paying strength coaches up to, upwards, now you're seeing 7-figure salaries for strength coaches. Like, it's obviously a very important part of the athletic development. And there are some high schools now that do have dedicated strength staffs. I still find that pretty rare, especially in my area. Most kids are just kind of on their own. When it comes to that, and I often think about that, how good would some kids be if they started at a younger age with a good quality, as you call it, an athletic development program, instead of just focusing on the sport itself.
Yeah, but high schools, and I have contracts with 3 different high schools where I have a full-time staff in the high school. That's a whole different world. It's, when you've got a football team coming in at 6 a.m. and you've got 40 guys, again, sufficient for the high school level, for foundational. But if you're a guy that wants to move on and play at the college level, you're probably going to need to go outside of that and find somebody that, because what happens, we get into a high school weight room, we've got time to get the important big lifts in and some auxiliary work, but we're not addressing speed development. We're not addressing force production. We're not spending the time to look at joint mobility. So it's limited on the amount that you can get out of a program like that, but it is becoming very, very common. Unfortunately, when you see a strength coach in a high school, there's usually a sports medicine contract with a large medical organization, and the strength and conditioning kind of just comes with it. So the people signing those deals really don't know much about what it takes to create an athlete. So they're just hiring somebody and putting them in there. And, I'm not saying that all are bad, but I'm saying a lot of times you're getting somebody new into the business and they're doing the best they can, but they're not making, really huge, meaningful impacts on these athletes, especially the ones that are looking for that higher level.
Nah, that does seem to be a common thing. And you do, especially if the parent can invest in it. I think it's worthwhile to invest in someone who's investing in your kid, not the team.
Right.
So they can spin that. Because a lot of times these coaches too, they just naturally gravitate towards the plug and play kids who are already good. They're not going to look at the kid who's got the worst bench press and say, how can we fix this? How can we make him better? They're going to go to the kid that's got the greatest bench press as their prize project and see, how do we get him even stronger? So they're going to spend that extra time developing your child.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And anybody can do that. Anybody can gravitate towards a high level athlete, but at the high school level, you're not going to develop a program unless you get some of those subpar kids and you get them to be an average athlete or an above average athlete. Because if you look at, and football is a good example, you've always got some pretty highly skilled guys on your team. And that's great, but you're not going to have a winning program unless you're building guys that are on the line and in the trenches. And that's done in the weight room. And so if you don't invest in some of those guys and like I said, take them from being a subpar athlete to an average or above average athlete, you'll never build a program.
Well, one final question I have, because you've worked with so many athletes across different ages, and we've talked about sometimes the same, the commonalities between them, but for you, what's the one thing that always gives you goosebumps with an athlete? So it gives you the goosebumps and reminds you why you did this to start. What is it that does that for you?
We discussed this before, but when that light bulb goes on, if I've seen a kid, and I'm thinking of a specific athlete right now, a female, I think she's 8th grader, and she's been coming to our gym for probably 3 years, 4 years, maybe. Comes in, doesn't do much, and it's just one of those ones where I've been close several times to, hey, this might not be the place, mom and dad, but the parents are good friends of mine. I played sports with the dad. So I've kind of let it go. And for whatever reason this year, it has just clicked. And, she's deadlifting a bunch of weight and she's doing the sprint workouts. And I think part of it is she comes in with her brother and she started lifting more weights than the brother who's older. And I think that's what made the light bulb go on. But, now I've talked to the parents, how is this carrying over to sports? And it's like, she's killing it this year. She's lighting it up in volleyball and softball. And there's no rhyme or reason to that. She just stayed with the program, stayed committed to it, and things just started to click. And, that is awesome when that happens. I love to see that because you can see it in their body language. You can see it, they're excited to be in there. They're excited to be working and they're excited to be successful on the field or court.
Well, I said that would be my last question, but I have a follow-up on that. Do you feel like that light bulb moment, can you usually draw a straight line from there to success?
In my experience, yes. Once I see that they're all in, because then as a coach, you get excited, you get more excited, you want to help them. But I think an important thing there is define success. That means so many different things. And, that might be a kid that just wants to make the JV team. And sometimes we make success all about that outcome. And, kids I want to be a Division I athlete. It's like, okay. And you softly have to bring them along and at some point have a conversation like, hey, let's look at getting you to a place where you can play right away. And so, yeah, I think once that light bulb's on, I think it is a direct path to success, but I think defining the expectation of what success is very, very important with athletes.
No, I agree. And as a parent, I love that there's people like yourself out there who are focused more on the athlete, on development of the athlete rather than those outcomes. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of parents listening who also like that. Where can people find you if they wanted to inquire about maybe hiring you or finding some of the systems you have available?
Yeah. So we have a full online platform. BensonSportsTraining.com is the best place to go for information. We have lots of different programs, from very, very sport specific programs. I mean, obviously high jump is something we do a lot of. Just had a young lady fly in for a few days from Georgia to work with me. But we're definitely building our online platform, our coaching platform. And we have a lot of different options. We're into a lot of different things. One of our newest things, and obviously this isn't as much online, but we're into a lot of physiological testing now, blood lactate, VO2 max, tying all that into our training. And so really, I come out of a very small community, but we're doing things at a very, very high level. And just like I said, doesn't matter age, doesn't matter sport. What matters is that burning desire to get better. And we love helping those type of athletes.
Oh man, I love it. But dude, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the time. I've learned a lot. Again, as a parent, these are things that matter to me. And I do think a lot of our listening base are parents, and they need to hear a professional say these kinds of things, that, hey, it's more about development. It's more about those light bulb moments more than it is the outcomes or about running your kid to death into sports and focusing on the right thing. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. We'll have to have you back on, and another time we got to see if that record still holds.
Well, thanks a lot, Tyler. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. I want to thank you guys for watching, and also a word of thanks to our sponsors who have made this episode possible. All I ask is that you guys please hit the like and subscribe button, as it helps the podcast grow, and so we can continue to bring on some great guests for you guys. I'll see you in the next one.